Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for the next webinar in our super webinar series sponsored by Metro EHS. I'm really excited to visit with all you guys today and to sit and learn from two amazing speech therapists that have a whole lot of experience. You're going to learn a lot today about the connection between early reading and speech, and there's so much more that's going on there than it's at work there than what I even knew. So I'm excited to share this. We're going to hear from our Vice President of Therapy Services, Chris Krajewski. She's a speech therapist, and Dr. Vidra Francis, who is a clinical director at our Bloomfield Hills location. So welcome, ladies, and we'll go ahead and get rolling. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's start learning.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to welcome you to our webinar today. I'm Chris Krajewski. As Karen mentioned, I have been a practicing speech language pathologist for 34 years now. It has really flown by. But one thing that I think keeps me really passionate about this field is I love the idea of, first of all, communication. And I feel that I'm a student of communication and communicators. It's fascinating to me. I could talk about it all day. But also the fact that one of the things that I love to do is acknowledge that everybody learns things a little bit differently. And sometimes we just need to set up the environment or give people sets of tools that helps them to be successful in their own way. And that is something that I value very much about what I do.
Hi, and I'm Dr. Vidra Francis. I've been doing speech pathology for 22 years now, and I really enjoy thinking of speech like a puzzle. When I meet someone that has speech needs or concerns, I love figuring out their communication behaviors and how I can help them best use those communication behaviors to have functional communication with their parents, their families, anybody just out and about in the real world. And it's just a fun puzzle for me. And I'm excited to be here doing this presentation with Chris today.
All right, I'm going to share my screen, and it looks like I am not on the right spot. All right, so give me a moment, everyone. All right, here we are. So the topic of today's webinar is connections between speech and reading. And as luck would have it, there are a lot of connections between speech and reading. And Vidra and I would like to talk to you a little bit about what those are, how you can identify those in your everyday, and some ways that you can really solidify the connections for your little learner. So here we go. So starting today with starting this whole process with a quote, just to get us thinking. And this is a quote by the author and artist James Britton. And what he said was, "Reading and writing float on a sea of talk." And I love this sentiment because what it reminds me is that all of these things, reading, writing, talking, language, they are all intertwined. They're all connected. And so they move together, they flow together. And if we can help our kiddos develop skills in one area, that will support the development of the skills in the other areas as well, because they all sort of come up together. So if you think about language as a whole, and then you think about talking and reading. Talking and reading are both sets of symbols that represent a language, right? So they are sets of symbols that represent ideas and thoughts in our head. So you'll see here we have a picture of a little four-legged friend who barks and who wears a collar and who is, a loyal friend. And we have two below that, two different ways to represent that idea. One of them is a printed word, and the other one is a spoken word. Now, they're not the same. One is a more visual representation, right? We use our eyes. The other one is a more of an auditory representation. It is a collection of sounds. But we have these two separate output modalities that both represent the same thing, this furry creature that we love and keep in our home and take for walks. So just to illustrate here that talking and reading are just two different output modalities for language, for what's up here in our mind. All right, so giving us a little bit of theoretical background here before we dive in. I love to think about the development of literacy and language through an emergent theory, emergent meaning just coming out, right? Gradually. So emergent literacy theory views learning to read as a gradual and continuous process that begins well before schooling even begins and is shaped by kiddos' experiences with print language and spoken language. So emergent just means that because kiddos are exposed at a very early age to these different things, they learn things about them, right? And it helps to support further development when our kiddos get into school. So it all starts well before school starts. And I have an example of that right here. So I'd like to spend a few minutes watching this cute little 19-month-old showing what she has learned just by exposure. So here we go. Okay, that is so cute. I could just watch it all day over and over again. But let's just think about that for a minute and think about it. Oh, sorry about that. Think about, what do you think this little peanut is learning about reading? Does she know how to read yet? No. Does she know how to talk yet? No, right? But she's learning. She's showing that emergent skill coming through. So one thing that she has shown us that she has learned so far is how to handle a book, how to hold a book, the way that we orient the book when holding it. It's not, sideways or upside down. It is in a certain position all the time. How to turn pages, knowing when one page is finished and we're moving on to the next. And how to move from left to right on a page. You probably saw her little finger doing some pointing. Maybe she has witnessed a family member or a person pointing to words as they read along on the page, and she has adopted and adapted that understanding as well. So really, she's learning about the connection between the printed words on the page and what we do out loud, right? We do those things at the same time when reading a book. She may be also getting a sense of some early recognition of word shapes and maybe some letters. And finally, that pictures and words on the page go together. They are related in some way, shape, or form. And so we can use those pictures to help us craft the story out loud as well. So those are some examples about what this very young child has already learned about reading. Now, because we're talking about the connection between speech and reading, what did we notice that this child has learned about talking? Well, she has developed potentially some phonemic awareness. And what that means in the speech field is the ability to recognize and manipulate the individual sounds within spoken words. So she has been producing a set of sounds. She's been combining them in different ways, kind of playing with that when you heard sort of the babbling, and really just experimenting with what sounds can do when you put them together. This little peanut is also developing awareness of the structures of the mouth and how to move them to make those sounds, right? And in our field, we call that motor planning. And what that is basically is the ability to have a thought about what we want to do with our parts and then be able to execute that. So she's learning what it feels like to say uh-oh and what it feels like to say ba-ba-ba. And she's becoming much more aware of the structures of the mouth and how to move them to get that sound. Something that you may have noticed here is intonation, and that is a part of our communication and speech. And what that means is the variation of pitch and stress to create meaning when we're talking. This is not something we often think about as having a lot of impact on meaning, but it really does. Think about the difference between a sentence, I like to eat pie, and I like to eat pie, right? Same sentence, different inflection, intonation, different meaning. And we understand that as communicators. And what listening to this little vary her pitch, it sounds very conversational. She's learning a lot about how she can make pitch, make her voice go up and down, and it impacts the meaning. And finally, she's using some contextual language. And that is certain words, phrases, expressions, and using them in a certain context where it's appropriate. For example, when she said, uh-oh, we all know kind of what that means when we hear someone say, uh-oh, there's a specific context that we use that in, right? And she is learning about how certain things belong in certain contexts. So, wow, she's really learned a lot, even before she knows how to speak and knows how to read. So what this is all to illustrate that reading and talking are interconnected skills. And it doesn't just mean they're connected or they have things in common. What it means is that they are interconnected. And according to Merriam-Webster.com, that means joined or related, often implying a network or a system where parts depend on each other. So they are interconnected, they flow together, they go together. And if we can develop skills in one of these areas, we are going to be supporting the skills in the other and vice versa. And developing skills in both of those areas supports the overall language skills as well. So it is all sort of an interconnected web that falls under that language umbrella. So how can our caregivers build connections between printed and spoken language? And you might already be thinking of some things that you are doing or ways you could support in your own world. And if you are, way to go, because you really do have this. You have it on lock. You've got this. There are so many opportunities in our everyday lives to expose kiddos to printed and spoken words, sort of spoken in or simultaneously. And we can do this every day. Just by taking a little bit of a different look at your environment, you might be able to identify some things that combine printed and spoken word, and we can support both of those things during those activities. And here are some examples here on the screen: reading of a menu, talking about what kind of foods we like, finding it on the menu, using your finger to locate it and identify the printed word that matches. Always a lot of pictures on menus too. You can't go wrong when you add pictures to the mix. That just strengthens those connections by giving kiddos more clues to what's on the page. We have an image of a parent reading to a child. And then we have some more everyday mundane things we may not think about, but really are valuable to connect reading and speech. Like, for example, our friendly neighborhood crossing guard with her stop sign, right? So these are just some examples. And I imagine that you, as we're starting to think about this more specifically, are coming up with some of your own as well. So how to support early speech and reading in young children? Quite simply, reading together, right? And we know this as parents, that we can get a lot of benefits from reading together, only 2 of which are supporting speech and reading. So it's a really valuable activity to do with your kiddo. And you can do this even before your child is reading. You can keep reading materials around and available in your home, even when kiddo is not reading yet. They're available, they can be experimented with, they can be referenced, and they're just around so that kiddos have that exposure to them. Of course, reading to your child, right? Reading books and stories with your kiddo before bedtime or in the morning, wherever, whatever that special time is, you're just only supporting both speech and reading in those connections. I love to advise people to read those favorite books often. As parents, sometimes we get a little bit frazzled with reading the same book over and over and over and over again. But it is very valuable to do this because it allows our kiddos to learn the story, learn the words, and it gives them the opportunity to sort of have a lot of opportunities to practice those words and those stories. So it's okay if you can hang in there with your kiddo when they want to read the same book over and over again. I highly recommend it. It just gives more familiarity to speech and reading. Allow your kiddo to fill in words when reading familiar books. That is a wonderful way to connect printed word and spoken word, right? Brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at, right? Allow your kiddo then to say the word and point to the word at the same time, making those connections. Point to the printed words along the page as you're reading them aloud. There is no better or easier way to do this. Many of us do this sort of intrinsically without even realizing it. And that is absolutely a wonderful tool to connect what you're saying with exactly where on the page I am finding that word, right? This is me saying that. It's a wonderful skill. Choose books with those repetitive themes so that when we turn a page, the words we are hearing and the words we are seeing are somewhat predictable after kiddo sort of has opportunities to practice. That predictability is a good thing. Choosing books with rhyming words is an amazing way to call attention to the fact that some words sound similar. And when you look at those words, they kind of look similar too, right? Our rhyming words. So this is a great way to call attention to that phonemic awareness piece that I was talking about earlier. Wow, when it sounds like this, it's these letters. And look, here they are over here too, in this different word that sounds similar, right? So you're connecting and encouraging kiddos to listen to the components of the words. And that is phonemic awareness. Talking about reading, talking about talking about all of the things that are going on in life. You cannot go wrong with exposing kiddos to language in this way. And then finally, ask your child to read to you. How fun would it be to have your person read you their favorite story, to hear how they're hearing it, to see what they're thinking about the pictures? It is a wonderful way for them to be sort of in charge, right? And connecting words to print. So sometimes we're not reading a book, but in those cases, there are a lot of opportunities to support both speech and reading when you're not reading, when you're out and about in your world where you are all the time. Think about and look for examples where spoken and written word can be sort of connected for your kiddo. So talking to your child in general, always, you can't go wrong exposing them to the spoken word. Talk about what you are doing, what you're seeing, what you're thinking. All of those things are wonderful things to discuss. Out in the world, pointing out logos, letters, words in the child's world, and connecting them with the sounds, with the labels, with the spoken word. Some examples on the slide, right? Good old McDonald's with the golden arches. What kiddo doesn't know that, right? But the print and the large letter M and the printed McDonald's on that sign, wow, the more you're exposed to that, the more you can pay attention to that, the more it's going to make sense to you as you are later on identifying those words, sounds, and letters in other forms of print, like in a book. Quick example for Kroger from me, this was pivotal in my family. If you look at the Kroger logo, the letter K and the letter G are very sort of salient, right? They really stand out as opposed to the other letters there. And so for my kiddos, it was really helpful for them to learn that K says K and G says G, because we would say Kroger, Kroger. And that was just a really helpful tool for my kiddos. So I imagine you can think of some examples in your life as well, but those are just some good ones that come to mind right away to illustrate this.
So now I'd like to talk about some of my favorite books connecting speech and reading for early learners. So first on my list is Where Spot, and this is a great book because it's engaging and it's interactive because it has all these fun little flaps, and you can work on open the door and answering yes and no questions. You can also talk about all the different animals in the story and practice animal sounds. So this story uses familiar objects, and kiddos can learn words like inside, behind, and under. Next is Brown Bear, what do you see? And this is a great book because it uses repetitive language and it helps build vocabulary with different animal names and colors. The repeated questions and sentence structure make it easy for kiddos to memorize and retell the story. The Cheerios Playbook is one of my faves because it's so much fun for kiddos because it's so interactive. It's time to read and it's time to snack. So this book works on fine motor with the Cheerios, attention, and task completion. It also promotes learning shapes, colors, counting, and matching. And then last but not least is our fave, Pete the Cat, specifically Pete the Cat, I Love My White Shoes. And this book is great for its repetitive and positive message and review of colors. And as a bonus that I really like, you can read and sing along with this book on YouTube.
Okay, so I would like to talk about a couple of my faves for slightly older kiddos. These are examples of books that can help us to develop slightly more advanced areas of language and speech. So good old Mama, Mad at Llama, Mad at Mama, obviously has rhyming words. And it is a great way to illustrate that they are very similar sounding, as evidenced by my mistake earlier, but that they are still very different. So this is a wonderful instant to talk about phonemic awareness. This book, if you're familiar with it, also helps kiddos to learn how to deal with big feelings, right? When this llama was getting frustrated, what happened and how his mom helped him sort of work through that. It's really a good story. If you give a mouse a cookie and all of the other books within that series, Moose a muffin, Pig a pancake, and so on, wonderful for talking about cause and effect, putting words to, if I do this, then this will happen. And also sequencing. So being able to keep things in order when we're speaking and be able to be kind of organized so that your listener can follow you. Those are important aspects of verbal communication as well. And finally, You Are What You Eat. This is an adorable little book about figurative language. Figurative language simply means common expressions where the words don't necessarily match with the meaning, right? And this can be really tricky to navigate for older kiddos who are learning language and maybe struggling with really knowing, am I really what I eat, or does that mean something different in our society? So a little bit more complex language here, but also really valuable for our older kiddos.
So now I'd like to share some ideas and everyday activities that you can do to connect speech and reading with your kiddo at home, in the car, when playing outside, and even when you're at the grocery store. So to make it easier, I've split these activities up by age of your kiddo and where you might want to try these activities. So if we're looking at birth to 6 months old, at home, read to baby in the tub. So try reading the baby while they're in the tub, but make sure you use those plastic or vinyl books that can withstand bath time. In the car, play children's music. Pick music that has lots of repetitive phrases and rhymes like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, or Old MacDonald. Outside, read a book before doing an outdoor activity. So if you plan to take baby to a zoo, a farm, or a petting zoo, maybe read a book about farm animals or sing Old MacDonald while you're walking around the farm. At the grocery store, look at magazines while you're in the checkout line. Describe the people and objects you see on the cover or in the pictures. And also, this may help keep baby from getting fussy. If we move to our 6 month to 1 year old kiddos, at home, start to connect objects and pictures. So you can help baby connect objects and pictures by showing them a picture in the book and then pointing to the real object. So, for example, if there's a picture of a teddy bear, you might say, "See the teddy bear?" And then point to their teddy bear and say, "This is your teddy bear," or "Your teddy bear is on the bed." In the car, read signs out loud as you approach them. So, for example, as you're approaching a stop sign, talk about how you're going to stop at the stop sign. If you're outside, use sidewalk chalk. Write your baby's name on the sidewalk or driveway with the sidewalk chalk, and then point to their name and say or read it to baby. And then when you're in the grocery store, take a walk through the pet section. Look at the pictures and words on the different pet food containers and products. And then you can point to the words and talk about the animals and the sounds they make. For our 1 to 2 year old kiddos at home, read a book with familiar activities. So find a book with pictures of kiddos doing familiar activities like playing or eating. And for this age range, books should have simple rhymes, predictable text, and only a few words on each page. So for example, Good Night Gorilla is a great book. In the car ride, do a road trip sing along. Sing songs or nursery rhymes while you drive. Encourage kiddo to sing along and then make it fun and try saying the rhyming words louder or softer than the other words so that they stand out. If you're outside, point to special buildings. Point to the post office or the library, a school or a hospital, for example, and look at their signs. Talk to kiddo about the people that work in those buildings and how they're helpful to us. If you're in the grocery store, definitely take a trip down the cereal aisle. Read the different words on the cereal box and then point out the pictures. And this is always a fun activity because cereal boxes are often really colorful and they have a lot of different fun characters. For 2 to 3 year olds at home, read and repeat. We can't mention this enough. So when you're reading to kiddo, choose books with repeated rhymes, words, or phrases. And then after reading the book many, many, many times, because you can never read too much, stop before the end of a familiar sentence and encourage the kiddo to fill in the word. So for example, "I do not like it, Sam, I am. I do not like green eggs and hopefully they'll say ham." In a car ride, do a story retell. While you're in the car, retell a story that you and kiddo have read often. Ask them to fill in the blanks or tell what happens next. When you're outside, play body part bingo. Get that sidewalk chalk out again. Have kiddo lay on a large piece of paper or on the sidewalk, and then trace their body with the chalk or a marker if you're using the paper. Then with kiddo, say and write the names of their body parts, and then have them match their body parts to the drawing. If you're at the grocery store, make a grocery list and have your kiddo help you. Write the words down and show them the word on the page. Then, as you get the items, have them make a mark next to the word or scratch the word out. So they won't be able to read the word yet, maybe, but at least they'll be learning more about print. For our 3 to 4 year old kiddos at home, hang up letters. Keep them at eye level so you can put them on the fridge, you can put them on their bedroom door, and then practice naming them often. If you're in the car, play I Spy with billboards. Like Chris mentioned, point out those familiar logos to your kiddo. Soon they'll recognize the different names and you can start a fun game of I Spy. If you're outside, do some dirt drawing. Give kiddo a straw or a safe stick and have them practice lines, shapes, or letters in the dirt or sand. And then if you're in the grocery store, play guess the word. Look at different word labels on cans, bottles, or boxes in the store or in your cart. And have kiddo guess what the words are by looking at the pictures on the products. Finally, for our 4 to 5-year-old kiddos, start learning about time concepts. So hang up a large calendar at your house and then talk to kiddo about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. You could even include last month or next year. Talk about different activities and write them down on the calendar. And then as time passes, you can cross out each day. In the car, look for letters on signs and then say the sound of the letters. So, for example, if you see a bus stop, you might say, "There's the bus stop." Bus starts with B. The letter B says B. If you're outside, play rhyming games and make a rhyming game using the names of objects or people that you see outside. So, how many words can your kiddo think of? So, for example, I see a tree. What rhymes with tree? We have B, C, key, etc. Or I see a boy. What rhymes with boy? Toy or joy? At the grocery store, try a coupon matchup. Ask kiddo to find the food item that matches the picture on the coupon. You could also ask them to find a specific letter or number on the coupon. So when do you need to check in with a professional? If your kiddo is not using many words compared to other kiddos their age, makes speech sound errors, or it's difficult for familiar listeners to understand them, maybe they get frustrated when he or she can't communicate. They're having difficulty matching sounds and letters. Maybe kiddo does not easily recognize beginning sounds of words or when words rhyme, or maybe they're avoiding books or reading, or they express a dislike for reading. Don't hesitate to check in with a professional. Believing your child will grow out of the problem may affect your child's ability to learn and communicate in the future. So again, don't hesitate to get help. Please feel free to reach out to a Metro EHS to find a speech language pathologist in your area that can help your kiddo with both speech and literacy or reading concerns. So thanks for joining Chris and I today to chat about how speech and reading are connected and learn different ways how you can take everyday routine activities and make them opportunities to help develop your kiddo's speech and reading skills. Please feel free to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidra. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you guys so much. This was such fantastic information. If there's any questions from the audience, you guys go ahead. You can ask now or type it in the chat. That's fine. I did have a question. When you have kids, everybody else has advice for you and wants to tell you, well, don't worry about this or worry about this. So when do you as a parent, what's the best situation when you're like, I don't know, I have a concern. I'm not sure if they're going to grow out of this. What advice would you offer to parents if they had that concern that there was something inside them that everybody else was saying my kid's going to grow out of it, but I'm just not sure about that? What would you guys say?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that feeling as a parent, so I think I can respond to that. Remember that as a parent, your scope of practice is your child. You are the expert on that child, and so oftentimes your intuition might be nudging you. And I think it's a good idea to pay attention to that intuition. If you are curious or concerned or wondering about something, seek out the advice of professionals. Find out if there is something you should be worried about. Whatever the results of that, you will have more information, right? So it is an information gathering process. So you will have gathered more information to help guide any decisions you make moving forward. So it never hurts to be informed. If you are wondering something, ask it, and seek out the advice of professionals whenever you have that feeling that maybe something isn't quite right.
That's great. Yeah, that's just a great answer. It makes me feel good already knowing, it's just better to get those answers. It's better to just put your own heart at ease. So, do we have any other questions out there? We'll give you a few seconds. Otherwise, we'll let you guys go. And I'm not seeing any open up. I do want to give you a teaser. Usually we do these webinars at the end of the month. Our next webinar is right around the corner. We're going to do it in 2 weeks. And this one I don't want you to miss. This one is about sports injuries and making sure your kid is super for the summertime. We have lots of kiddos that participate in summer. soccer and softball and baseball, and we want to be sure that our kids are safe. So this is a great opportunity for you to learn about prevention tips and what to do if something happens. So one of our best PTs will be here to talk to you about that. Her name is Kelly Johns, and she is fantastic. So I don't want you to miss that. Stay tuned to our Facebook and other social media platforms to get more information about that webinar. And we will see you guys next time. I believe that one is scheduled for June 13th. So hey, be sure to register. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, Vidra. And bye-bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day. Have a
Bye.
great weekend.